Hi guys. The second part of my geomancy video reading thing, and I said that I would show you guys how to interpret this chart, which I made in the previous video, and I will use it, interpret the chart using this is the traditional method, and then I will go about making another chart, and I will interpret it using my style of chart reading. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about astrology because that's where I'm most familiar with, and that's what I work with. And I'm just going to, well, no, I'm not going to bother with, well, no, I'll go ahead and make the visuals. I think it'll be helpful for you in the long run, and you'll be familiar at least with what it is and what it looks like. So the houses in geomancy, there are houses in geomancy. Each one of these spaces where these in what's the word where these figures reside, these are called houses. I'm going to also isolate them as squares so that way it's easier to see and identify. Like this. Alright, so each of these stations are what we call houses, and I utilize, and I think most people utilize, whenever they refer to houses, they utilize the astrological house system um, in describing what their stations mean. However, in addition to that, there is another way to interpret it. There's the house system from astrology. This is like the first, this is the second, this is the third. Forgive my handwriting, I'm kind of in a very weird position. This is the fourth, this is the fifth, this is the sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So one way, the first way that I think most are probably kind of latching onto first is the geomantic house, not geomantic house, the astrological house system. And in that case, the first house, this, will always represent the querent, the person asking the question, or your client. So in this case, I asked this question, so this represents me. I'm represented as puer. For good reason, actually, because I've been a bit on the militant side, but that's not here or there. So, the first house represents the person who's asking the question, and this will indicate aspects or personality traits that that person may have. Yes, of course, I'm beardless. If I had a sword, I'd probably be playing with it. And this is one of the interpretations for this figure right here, is a sword. But it's also the figure of the man or male. So it does have a more of a rash meaning to it, and it's called puer, P-U-E-R. This figure is called Carcer, and that's the second figure. Second house usually represents your resources and your finances and your belongings. Not all the time, but that's the stable, static meaning for it. So this is the second house. Third house represents your siblings, brothers, and sisters, but also your neighbors and neighborhood, your local community. This one is tristitia, which means sorrow and sadness. This one, the fourth house, represents your home and your father. And in this one, we have via, which means change or the way. This figure means change. Whenever you see this figure, it means things are shaking up. Next, for the fifth house, we have sex, pleasure, hobbies, and speculative ventures. Now, I will say the speculative ventures, I mean kind of like things involving gambling or chance whether or not things will work, things that are fluxy. Then we have for the sixth house, your health. So this is your sixth house. And I'm kind of overlapping a little bit. Your seventh house represents your another person. So this house, the first house, the opposite of the first house is the seventh house. And the seventh house will always represent the other person or the opposite person. It could be your enemy, it could be a business partner, or it could be your wife or husband. So seventh house is wife, business partner, enemy. It could be someone with whom you have a long-term relationship with. That's also another possible interpretation. Next, for the eighth house, we have their money. So your enemy's money, your business person's or business partner's money, an opposite person's money. It could also represent death or things that are finite. Eighth house is funky. I don't usually read too much into it unless it's magically related to magic or something. Then we have the ninth house, which represents spiritual matters, religion, or education. 10th house represents career or the mother or king or government leader. 11th house is your friends, wishes. Could also be just general social peeps. And then 12th is your enemies that you don't know about or surprising things that are happening. So that's what the houses are. So one way that we can read this is to find, for example, where does myself, this is the first thing that I would do, is I would look for where this first house figure, which is me, the querent, where does it repeat in this section? It repeats in the fifth house here. So we know that actually the answer to this is probably yes, but in a very tactile way. So because that this tends, I'll also add, the concept of love in geomancy translates in as a fifth house question, as in here, and a seventh house question here. And then we have to also look at the nature of the figure puer. So it translates and moves to the fifth house. So yes, but it's not very emotionally receptive. There's some weird, really super weird emotional stuff going on, or lack thereof going on. So that is a quick way to answer the question. So we looked for the first, we found the first house figure, and then we went and we said, okay, where is that repeating here? And we find it in the fifth house. Is that a fifth house? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, in the fifth house. I'm having to think a little bit because this is not my normal style of reading. And even this layout isn't necessarily my cup of tea. I usually read using this layout here. To attribute this, you just want house 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I guess I could write it out for you. Let's see here. Give me a moment and I will. There you go. And bah! I've put everything in the, I'm trying to see if I can get it as close as possible. Oh yeah, I forgot to zoom in. Let's do that. Zoom me in. Zoom me in. Okay, I guess not. Oh well, I tried. So, I usually read from charts like this because it's easier for me to ID where everything is. But it's just this is the exact same thing as this. So, that is one way to figure out where things are at in the chart. And then because the person in question is represented by does X. So we have love, which is represented by the 5th house and the 7th, but 7th is more so like long-term stuff. We also, and another person, we also want to look at the connection between the 1st house and the 7th house because we still have this person X to consider. So you want to break down your question. Love and X. That means that is a 7th house question and a 5th house question. 7th house is Tristitia, which means individual is very Saturnine and probably old and like, nah, I'm just kidding. Very Saturnine. Sorrowful or slightly on the morose side of the equation. And so we would want to also see where does this person's figure appear. Look at that. It appears in the 3rd house as well. And there's mutual reception. A lot of Saturn. Good God. So we have Carcer moving also to the 1st house here. I'm using this because it's a lot easier. Or if you want to look up here, Carcer moves right beside the 7th house. So that is another way of saying yes, but it's a very oddly cold. The person has this really weird cold attribute, or the relationship has a weirdly cold attribute to it. But there is also, even with this, some very strange dynamics even with this. So let's go back. We've looked at the basics of our question. So we does X love me? One way is to just look at what is going on right here in this part of the chart, or around here if you're using this kind of chart. The other way is to look at the judge right here. Actually, the judge and the witnesses give you the answer to the question. So, we have the left witness and we have the right witness. Well, right witness and left witness. And typically, we can look at it in two ways: past, present, future, or person 1, person 2 outcome. In this case, we have amicia, which is loss. But this is a question about love. Therefore, amicio actually doesn't take on its losing meaning, as in, oh no, I lost my keys. Not that kind of loss. It comes on the you lost your heart kind of meaning. And so does this one. So that's actually in both sides of the equation, both sides of the reading. So we know that at least person 1 and person 2 are in love, which is weird in this case. Well, let's see what happens when we get to the judge. For the judge, we have populace. Populace is a coupling card. If you, not card, I call it a card because this looks like a card. It looks like the 8 of diamonds to me. But it's a coupling figure. And just like with my question from my last video, which I'm going to show it for a minute, about how my Thanksgiving is going to go, and I pulled up populace. The reading that I gave that was there's going to be a lot of people involved. Similar here, especially in relationship readings or readings about love, to see populace usually means that the two individuals end up coupling. So that is a very odd yes, but we, as you can tell, we're starting to get very detailed a little bit, or we're starting to peel back some of the layers. Yes, is what this says. But this also says this is some cold mess. Cold, shivery. This is some, well, kind of cold. No, it's cold. No, kind of cold. It's kind of cold. Yeah, kind of cold. I'll go with kind of cold. Um, Equivalent to matching Flint type of cold though. So for now, I'm gonna put that on pause because then we're going to get into, at this point, we would get into, all right, so why is it so cold? And then we look at the lines and the way of points. Like for example, we have the air line and the earth line in similarity, so we would look at the air line and see where that takes us. Air, it doesn't take us anywhere, so let's look at the earth. Okay, interestingly, we have earth and it also doesn't take us anywhere. What that means is that this is a very direct question. It's a yes or no question, and there is very little else underneath, beyond what was actually asked. There's no source point here. Well, hold up. Sorry. Well, no, hold up. There is Earth. There's no air here. So we have Earth, but no Earth. Earth, but no Earth. Air, no air, no air. So yeah. Um, if anything, that tells us that we don't have much communication as much as we should going on. So we also have a quiet situation or silence going on in this weird thing, relationship-like thing that this is showing. So that is the basis of making a chart and tearing a very, very, very rough way to tear it apart. I'm going to do another one. And this one, let's see here. Let's look at career prospects. And the question that I like asking the questions, will X get a high paying, I'll just put high paying job within the next, we'll say 8 months. Will X get a high paying job in the next 8 months? Ooh. Well, that's the question. It's a question about job. So, job question. So I'm going to get my trusty dice again. I'm going to roll them, and I'm going to make another chart. I think I'm going to end the video now and just start a new one. So, till next time.